Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Kratitam Purana Muninam Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Ritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatvam Anusantatami Bhagavad Gita Bhavatveshini Namostute Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pullara Vindayata Patra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajvalito Jnanamaya Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraika Parnaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Geetamritaduhe Namaha Mukham Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yatkripa Tamaham Vande Paramananda Madhavam Yam Brahma Varunendra Rutra Marutaha Stunvanti Divyaistavaihi Vedai Sangapada Panishadaihi Gayantiyam Samagaha Dhyanavastita Tatkatena Manasa Pashyantiyam Yoginaha Yasyantam Navidhu Sura Suraganaha Devaya Tasmai Namaha Devaya Tasmai Namaha Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja Aham Tvam Sarva Papebhyah Mokshayishyami Ma Shuchaha. So we are in the 8th chapter now. And in this chapter, which is a continuation of the 7th chapter, in the 7th chapter, we heard about the totality. Up to the 6th chapter, we had heard a lot about, who am I really in the individual sense. But then from the 7th chapter, we started with really understanding what is this totality. So we see that Lord Krishna explains, in the beginning, he told Arjuna, okay, I'm going to tell you everything about me. Then when he comes to the last 2 shlokas of 7th chapter, he tells him, okay, that person who's a jnani understands me as the 7 terms that he uses, the Adhyatma, Brahma, and then Adhyagnya, and then Karma. So all these terms, he says this. And the reason he brings about, he says this, he says, at the time of the departure of all of us from this body, as we know, we have actually rented this body, this body has been rented based upon, we just like we build a brand new home, we built this body over a period of time, over a period of 70, 80, 90 years, depending upon how long we live. We have actually built this body and we are renting it. At some point, we have to depart from here into a new home and again start building a new home in the next life, right? So the idea is, as I'm moving from this body to another body, we need to have only one thought in our mind, which is that ability of us to sink in with that totality, with the whole thing, what is really out there. Today, we don't live that kind of a life. Today, I think I'm this individual, and I think I have this space, and I have all this stuff in front of me. Everything at the end of the day is mithya, mithya, or is really Maya. It's an illusion. I need to give up all this and recognize who I am and recognize my connection with the whole totality. And that is why this chapter is very important, because he's talking from a jnani's perspective. In the 7th chapter, we heard a lot about how this world, starting with, Rasoham Apsu Kaunteya, those shlokas, he says, I'm the essence in all this. I'm everything. I'm in the building. I'm in the phone. I'm everything. All that we heard. But then at the level of the jnani, he's already more advanced. It's like, somebody who is graduating from school to a PhD level. At the level of PhD, if you hear somebody who's really knowledgeable about things, that person will not really converse in a normal person's way, that person will use high level terms. Like, if it is two theoretical physicists or somebody speaking, they will talk, about maybe cosmos or, quarks and those kind of things. All the time, the mind will be thinking only on those levels, right? They will not talk about the regular marketplace. So too, here you find that in the 8th chapter, it is at the very high level, and it is at the level of the jnanis. It's really simplifying, purifying everything that we live in this world. We are the ones who make the life, our own lives complicated, right? We think there is so much going on and everything, but at the end of the day, all that is nothing but a show. If I can only pull myself back from the show and look at the whole thing that is happening, whether it is the events that is happening, whether it is situations where I either get very happy or sad, all that is nothing but a show. So that is anitya. It is unreal, actually. I need to disengage myself. So that is why this chapter is important, for us to completely disengage, having known what this world is, and then look at myself, look at really, so there is a lot of upasana, a lot of sadhanas that is given here. So you will see all that. Any questions? Okay. So then we see that the 8th chapter is really based on that last 2 shlokas of the 7th chapter. In the last 2 shlokas, the 7 terms was mentioned. And so Krishna basically, at the end of, you will see the 8th chapter, he will then talk about how he wants to bring, he's talking to Arjuna, right? And we are all Arjunas. So he wants to emphasize that at the end of Prayana Kali, at the end of your life, think about only Ishvara. That is his final message. So we'll see that as we move on. So in shlokas 1 and 2, we saw that he talks about the 7 terms. He talks about, this Brahma, starting with Brahma or Brahman, Adhyatma, then Karma, then Adhibhutam, Adhidaivam. He says all this. And then in 2nd shloka, he talks about Adi Yajna, Katham, this one, Dehismin Madhusudana. Here he's referring to Madhusudana, who's referring to as, who's Krishna. And he calls him Dehes Asmin, here, oh Krishna, where you have taken a body just like me, such a person, but you're the best of all of them, best of all human beings. Tell me what the whole thing is. So that is where the 2 questions Arjuna is repeating. And this is just to remind you, it is nothing but in the 7th chapter, we had the shloka, Bijam Mam Sarva Bhutanam, Vidhi Partha Sanatanam, Buddhir Buddhimatamasmi, Tejas Tejasvi Namaham. Just to connect 7th chapter and 8th chapter, now you see that in 7th chapter, this is where the concept of really the totality was introduced. And now you see that being more refined into the simple terms called as Brahman and also Adhyatman. So those are the things that we are seeing. So after this first 2 shlokas, you see that Krishna now answers his question. So first he will, any questions? I think. So first, Krishna will start to answer the question of what is really that Brahman? Okay. Now, that Brahman is essentially, in second chapter itself, Krishna had already talked about saying that, he had used a lot of Avinashi to Tadviti, that, that Brahman is the one which is totally imperishable, it is supreme, it is eternal. He says all this, right? So here he will go into a little more detail about really that aspect of it. And then he will also explain what this Adhyatma is. So on one hand, we have Brahman, and then what is Adhyatma? So Adhyatma is basically our own Swabhava. Swabhava, not from a point of view, again, of who, Sunita is, how she looks and all that, but it is Swabhava, really the inner self. So that is what he's talking about in shloka number 3. And then 4, he continues with the same theme. So in 3, he talks about, he says that Brahman is Aksharam. Aksharam Brahma Paramam. So at a very high level, he is completely Aksharam. Ksharam means something which is perishable. Aksharam, which is totally imperishable. I know this reminds you of this Akshara Abhyas, right? Akshara Abhyas, which is, some of you may be thinking about doing this for your grandchildren now. So as soon as the child starts to speak, you want to teach the very first Akshara, means, of course, letters also. Just like how our letters are imperishable, right? Imperishable in a relative sense. We need those Aksharas to make words. Words may perish. I mean, I know the dictionaries, for example, some words which are not used anymore is discarded, new words come in all the time, right? But then those Aksharas, they don't disappear at all because we need them. So they are imperishable in a relative sense. And here he's referring to that Brahma, which is Aksharam, Brahma Parama. And then Swabhavo Adhyatma Uchyate. Uchyate meaning it is said. And that same Brahma, he says, is Swabhava. Within myself, it is that that aspect of it, which is a small part of it. So Adhyatma is part of Brahman. Okay. So Brahman is everywhere, but it is that Adhyatma which is within ourselves. With, again, English words are very limiting. You can't, it is that in that self within each everyone is Adhyatma, and it is Swabhava, that aspect which is the absolute nature of every individual self. That is Swabhava Adhyatma. It's called as Adhyatma. Bhuta Bhava Udbhava Karaha. So Bhuta Bhava Udbhava. So that Swabhava, that aspect is the cause of the origin of the existence of things. So Bhuta means things, Udbhava meaning that origin or the uprising, if you want to say. Udbhava Karaha is the cause. And Visarga Karma Sangitam, and are those, the cause of the origin are those actions which are offered as sacrifice. So even though we have Brahman, we have Atman or Adhyatman, but what is it that is causing all this whole world of names and forms to happen? That is karma. So without an action, you cannot create anything. And that is what he's saying, and Visarga Karma. And that karma is in the form of Visarga, which means sacrifice. Again, going back to the 3rd chapter, where we talked about how that any action, only when it is done in the form of an offering, it leads to positive results. Just like how, we see the trees just giving us fruits, we see the sun shining. We never question the sun, why are you shining? It just shines and then does things. So too, for all of us too, only those actions, when I do it completely in the form of surrender, completely in the form of giving, will that have really a long-lasting positive effect. So too, that is the idea behind this aspect here. So by shloka number 4, we see at least 3 out of Arjuna's questions are answered, which is, the nature of Brahma, which is Aksharam, the nature of Adhyatman, what is that Adhyatman, which is ourself, and what is karma. Okay. So in Shloka 4, then he goes into a little more details on what is Adhibhuta, Adhidaiva, and Adhiyajna. Okay. So this is where we had kind of tapered off last time. So we have Adhibhutam Ksharo Bhavaha, Purushaschadi Daivatam, Adhiyajnyoha Mevatra, Dehe Dehabratam Vara. Okay. So, sorry, I think I must have used the Dehe in a different context. It is here that he refers to Krishna as somebody who is also in a body, Dehesmin Madhusudana, it's a little different context over there. So Adhibhutam is the at the gross plane. So, we explained about Adhyatma being the part of Brahman, which is in every being, and Adhibhutam is this individual being, the jiva, when you see me, you don't see me as Adhyatma, you actually see me as a bhuta or a being. So that Adhibhuta is also very important. So again, we're looking at these terminologies. You may say, why do I need to know all these terminologies, right? If you just tell me there is God existing, isn't that enough for me? But imagine if two jnanis, are talking with each other, okay? They will talk only in these terms, okay? In the term of, what is Adhi, because that's all that matters for them at the end of the day. For us, the names and forms and this, where is the latest iPhone? When is iPhone 16 or 17 coming up? Or what is the next thing in the market with regard to colors? Or nowadays, I'm just simplifying this, or there's too much, if I'm getting my child, if I'm getting my son or daughter married, what is the latest designs? So we are in the world of names and forms, but a jnani would be in the world of Adhi Yajna, Adhyatma. Maybe that's all they talk about, and if you, when I look at the number of texts that Shankaracharya has written, Bhagwan Adi Shankaracharya has written, and the great Mahatmas, everything is focused only at this level, very high level of thing. So one may say that, oh, but that's so boring, they're just talking about plain stuff. But for them, the names and forms are unreal, just that is why I'm going to spend a little time with this movie example. Our life is like a movie, things are constantly changing, and the number of movies that are produced today is just phenomenal, enormous. I mean, but still we are so fascinated. Ponniyin Selvam, then now I don't know what the craze is. Ponniyin Selvam, it must have taken the Mani Ratnam, I don't know how many years, 5 years or what, or during COVID, I think he did that amount of stuff. But look at the level at which Bhagavad Gita is taking us to, right? From the fact that if I can only recognize that same movie when I go to is actually a representative of my own life, then I will start to give up even my life, things that I'm getting attached to, and focus on something which is more important, which is much more simpler. So that is why you see all these terminologies being introduced, because I was also thinking, 8th chapter, boy, it seems a little dry or anything, but actually it is very, very profound, pushing us to that level of really thinking about, okay, what is really this Adhyatma? What is this Brahman? Because you will see that is what is talked about in most of the higher level texts. So Adhibhutam is that, he says, Bhuta means individual. Adhibhuta is the totality of the individuals. So totality of the individuals, which is the Virat, the entire universe, everything is perishable. Everything is in a cycle, you know. It's hard to believe, but literally it is, we have all our cells in our body too, right? Almost like what, every 7 years they go through a cycle of dying, and then we get new cells. So that is Adhibhuta. Then Purushascha Adhidaivatam. So what is Daivatam? Daivatam is basically the gods associated with every individual organ, like for example, my eyes, my the five senses, then my karmendriyas, all them, they have a presiding deity. Okay, so that is a Daivatam. Now the collection of all that is this thing called Hiranyagarbha. It's a subtle plane. It's the, or we might call this also as a total mind. So that is the Adhi Daivatam. The control of the whole thing is Adhi Daivatam. Adi Yajnam. Now what is Adi Yajnam? Adi, so Yajna we know is the fire, right? Which keeps things going. But Adi Yajnam is the fire which, so that consciousness or that Brahman in the form of a lighting of something is how this jivas come into life. Okay, so Adi Yajnam is that yajna, that is that light of things, or that thing which gives a spark of consciousness, that spark of consciousness which makes things come to life. So that is Adi Yajna. So you see all the 4 characteristics are now explained. And so now let's move on to the movie example. Okay, so this is again, as I said, this is for a person who is already at a high level. And for that person, we are talking about all these aspects here. Yeah.
How I'm trying to understand Adi Daivatam. You said it's in the body, different things in the body, and then how can it be Hiranyagarbha? I'm trying to connect.
Correct. Right. Hiranyagarbha is the subtle aspect which makes, which is the presiding deity, if you will. So, like for example, for our eye to function well, okay, there must be something behind it to make the eye function.
Okay.
Okay. Now you take all my 5 senses. Now each one of them has its own deva,
Correct. I understand.
Now take totality of that aspect of it. For example, okay, think about it this way. Now we have this gross body, okay, which is very inert. And then we have Brahman, which is not inert. It is knowledge. It is the thing, it has chit, it's the consciousness aspect. Now, how do you meet that which is consciousness, okay, at a level, give something for the inert thing to
function. Right.
Okay. So that is that aspect of that Adi Daivatam.
No, I'm trying to connect Hiranyagarbha.
And that is called as Hiranyagarbha. So that is what he's saying. Purushascha Adi Daivatam. Hiranyagarbha is the subtle plane, which is a sort of a connection between that consciousness and the gross body.
Inert
matter.
Oh, okay. So that connection is called Hiranyagarbha?
Hiranyagarbha.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, I know you had asked about a few months ago, actually, this question with a different context.
Right. Because for me to understand. Okay.
Yeah, in this context, think about it that way. What is it that can bring something, that connection? Okay. So we will look at this movie example and then we'll come back again to the shloka to make sure we understand the whole thing. Okay. So last time actually, yeah.
Sunitha, can we say this like a functionality part, and it is like a, Hiranyagarbha is the server or electric transformer where everything is connected and it gives the energy, kind of a thing. Can we say that like that?
That would
Functionality of all the parts connected to the elements and
functionality connect.
like eyes, nose. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, maybe you could say that, but there is this other aspect of this Adi Yajnam, which I want to make sure we understand that as well.
Adi Yajnam, I am relating, like I am trying to understand like a creation, right?
No, Adi Yajnam is not. The karma is the action which brings, is the aspect which is the creative force for the whole thing. Okay, that is karma. So if you're thinking about it that way,
right. Yeah.
Without doing that karma, the whole creation wouldn't have happened. And in chapter 3, remember that whole cosmic cycle we had talked about, how from rain, food is produced, from food the jivas are produced, then this cosmic cycle. Actually, I should have brought that for maybe next week. I'll put that cycle just to connect. I'll put the cosmic cycle and then I'll connect all these 6 words. Maybe that will be useful. But here, think about it as say in a company, you have different departments. You have a sales department, HR department, research department, and everything. And for all these departments, if you had only the employees, right, how would they know what to do and everything? So you have a functional manager head who really is, who knows
connecting
everything.
Both of them. Who is connecting both of them. So,
exactly. That is how you think about in a very simpler sense is Hiranyagarbha.
So there is consciousness, there is inert body. So the connection is the Hiranyagarbha. Then what is causal body?
So the causal Adi Yajnam. So here Adi Yajnam is the light of consciousness, which makes the thing fire up.
Okay.
Fire up the
consciousness is lighted up by this causal plane.
Consciousness lights up.
Consciousness lights up because of this causal plane.
That consciousness, which is the fire. Yajna means fire. And fire is sort of a representative of something which is giving energy. So maybe to Madhuri's point, that Adi Yajnam, you can think about it as the energy part of it.
So can we say that ego part, I?
No, not ego. It'll be anything. Okay. Yeah.
So because it is showing like entity is I alone here.
So the causal plane. The causal plane entity is I alone here. I alone here refers to consciousness. Okay. So maybe I think for next week, I will put a nice diagram together. I have it in my head, but I should have put it down this one. So think about, you have consciousnesses everywhere.
Correct.
Okay. A small part of consciousness is in each one of us.
Correct.
Which is how we are functioning in every part of our body, whether I'm eating, sleeping, all that adhyatma. That adhyatma, which is also Brahman here. Okay. So he's saying that adhyatma in the form of this yajna, in the form of this energy. Okay. Adi Yajnam, I'm using these words so loosely because at the end of the day, it's so profound, but unfortunately, we have only English. Maybe if all of us learn Sanskrit, then we'll speak in, which is what actually right now we are trying to do here. Just to divert a little bit to say is, we have started spoken Sanskrit classes. And by the way, if any of you want to join, you're more than welcome to join this. Unfortunately, it's at 2:30 our time. Still not bad. It will be 5 o'clock, 5 a.m. your time. 5, anyway, that my point is English is limiting, but to come back here to Adi Yajnam, the causal plane entity is I alone. So what he's saying is, now you may think all this energy which you're using to do all this is something different. He's saying, guess what? That also it is me alone, which is that Brahman, which is that Adhyatman, which is part of Brahman. Okay, ultimately, he's coming for us. He's taking all the stuff that we normally work in our world. I mean, I don't know, at some point it'll be good to condense 7 chapter and 8 chapter and show that whole relation, how at our level today we are so hung up with the world outside of beings and objects and relationships and everything. Then slowly and slowly he brought it down to the 5 elements in 7th chapter. Then he also said a few things about how I'm the essence in that water, I'm the essence in the fire, I'm in this. He said all that, if you remember. So he was trying to bring about a distinction between just purely inert stuff and non-inert stuff. Correct? So to that extent, the simplification happened. Now here, he is trying to simplify it even further with just some terminologies. And then he's saying, guess what? At the end of the day, it is only I alone in the highest level. And here, the reason why I use the word Adhyatma is because at the individual self, we call that also I, isn't it? But we understand I today as Gita or Madhuri or Sunitha. That's how we understand. But what is the true svabhava of that I? It is nothing but that consciousness. Okay, so that is why he's saying the causal plane entity is I alone here in this body. So he's saying at the end of the day, this fire which is lighting in you and doing all this work and everything, that also is me alone. So at that level he is coming.
Okay.
So to understand all those terminologies here, we are now going to see how this old-time movie projector, it works, So we talked about how this projector, it consists of this bright light, we see in the second diagram here. That light, it falls on that strip. This is a strip, this is the image, and this film strip, it consists, a lot of these images which are frozen, correct? So when these images are frozen, they're shot in a movie camera, and or in the case of an animation movie, they make all these strips, and then this film strip is then dried and all that, of course. But then to show the movie, it is then wound in a particular thing, and then you have this light which falls on it. And once it does that, because of the speed at which it moves, suddenly you feel there is an illusion of the movement, right? This movie was actually frozen in all this. Suddenly the act of the light on these images creates that. So we talked about last time that, let's say that this is a story about a young boy called Aditya, and we're seeing this 5-year-old really, having his breakfast, maybe 8-year-old, maybe, he gets up, he eats his food, and then, he goes to school, and then he comes in the evening, he plays with his friends, and then he goes to sleep. So a very simple movie. So, but then all this is created in this images here. Now, let's say this light which is shining on Aditya, okay? Now it's a big, big light here. This light actually goes through this image. In this image, you have Aditya playing with his friends and everything, right? So it is this light actually which gave life to Aditya. A small portion of the light gave life to Aditya, a small portion of the light gave light to his toys, a small portion, all that. Very small portion. So that small portion of light gives an identity, and suddenly Aditya comes to life. So slowly that Aditya thinks that he's the one who's getting up, he's the one who's eating, he's this one. So basically you have that light which has identified itself with Aditya, right? In that movie. So far so good. Yeah. So imagine, so now you have that big light, which is actually what Brahman is, and that small light, which is now bringing that Aditya to life, which is that Adhyatma. Okay. Now let's take this a little further. Now we see, like I think in this also we see the image. We don't see the images here, but we see the final thing here, final picture here. So that light which has illuminated Aditya now thinks that it is Aditya. And it starts to think that it is doing everything. It is walking, it is, it's getting upset with his friends and everything. So he is basically become alive. Okay, that is that whole aspect of this, yajna part of it, which is acting in his body individually. And on a very bigger scale, the karma part of it, which is the whole creation itself, has come into a fact, So we see that now you have Brahman, we have explained. We have explained also what is Adhyatma. Now, karma is that force, Madhuri. So, when you ask the question of, what is creative force? So karma is a force which really brought this whole to creation. Okay, that is that. So at one level, now in this example, you may ask, so what is that karma, right? So in this example, that karma is that mechanism of the projector, which really, because of which that whole story has come to life. And also that karma is other things, where you had before it brought to life, the person who was drawing the images, the person who thought about the design. So all that is part of that karma. So it is that karma part of it which really brought this entire creation, isn't it? That animator's drawings, that designer, and this mechanism of the projector. So too now, let's think about this for us in this world. So it is that Ishvara who has actually brought this whole thing into place. We just take it for granted today, everything that is happening. But at a very high level now, you can imagine that Ishvara has got so much of a job here. He is that just by this action of karma, he's been able to bring so many billions of actions in 1 second. He has brought the whole thing to life. Just like in the strip here, it takes so much amount of strip just to create this whole movie, right? So that whole thing is done in by this Ishvara, So, but what happens is, we who are part of this whole movie, we take so much of ownership. And this is where your concept of that ego comes into play, As an individual ego, we think we have created our own world, everything, but we are actually part of this whole movie strip where there's so many strips that has happened in order to create this entire thing. And the more and more I identify with my own self, now I see how much of problems or anything that I go through. Whereas if I identify myself with this whole strip of images, you know that you are actually part of the bigger picture. So I hope you're able to see how that karma is, is the cause for the entire reaction, the entire thing that, has come into play. So that whole thing is this aspect of karma. So now let's think about, when you look at this thing here, now we see everything that is visible, we're able to understand. So for example, sorry, I went too fast. So we are going to come to this aspect of the fact of this Adi. Trying to make sure I'm covering all the points here. So let's so far so good with regard to what is karma, what is adhyatma, and what is Brahman, right? Let's come to the point that Gita raised, which is what is Hiranyagarbha. So this Hiranyagarbha is the literally, like I gave this example of this department head, if you didn't have the department head, everything would be chaos. People in HR won't know what they're doing, everything. So the department head is somehow the one that keeps everything together, okay, and sort of gives the direction for that particular group to act, right? So that part of it, you can look at it as the shloka says Purushascha Hiranyagarbha, So it is that aspect which really is a director in each one of us. It directs the I to do what it is supposed to do. Imagine if the I starts to say, I'm really bored with my job, the ear is able to listen to dot more, can do, the eye can only see small portion, right? Whereas the ear can listen much bigger. I want to be the ear. No, you can't do that. So that director of part of it is the Purusha, or we call this as is the Purusha, which is in a total sense is the Hiranyagarbha. Just like we gave the example of Adhyatma and Brahman. Adhyatma is this individual, Brahman is the total. So Purusha, meaning that an individual self is a director, at a total sense is the Hiranyagarbha.
So all Purushas put together is Hiranyagarbha. Or can we say each one has little consciousness, all consciousness together?
No, it is not a consciousness. So consciousness part of it is referred to as the Adhyatma.
Adhyatma. Okay. Mm-hmm. Got it.
The directorship. So that's why that example of a company with the departments and the head of the department who directs the employees to do exactly what that department has to do, that part of it you can say is the Purusha.
Okay. Purusha.
Okay. Yeah. Understood, right? So that is the Purusha and the Hiranyagarbha, that part of it. Now let's look at the Adi Yajna. So we have defined that the light that brings Tom to life, correct? We talked about earlier that big light, and then there's a small portion. So that light that illuminates everything. Now, from the Aditya's point of view, it's that small amount of light which is giving him that energy to do things. But from a totality, it is Adi Yajna. Okay. Bhuta means individual. Adhibhuta means the totality of bhutas. Same thing, Yajna, which means fire for an individual, which makes us do things. That is, and so that is, so the at the total level, it is Adi Yajna. Okay. So the now you see what Adi Daiva means. Adhibhuta, which is individual and the beings. And then you have also Adhiyajna, which is this. So this is the whole thing that in a very simple way is really what is happening in the world too. So our whole life is nothing but really like a movie, If you really relate it to the movie, it's just so it makes our life so much more simpler to think about. In a movie, everything is more perishable, everything is being created, everything is being destroyed. And how is that being fired up? It's just the whole light, And so any questions? Yeah. It's really very powerful if you look at it that way. Every day, if I'm reminded at the end of the day that this is all this it is, my life is just a movie, and I am a witness of the whole movie. I'm outside it. I'm not part of the movie. I mean, I choose. It's my choice on where I want to be. Today, I choose myself to be an actor in the movie, and I go through all the actions of the movie, all the emotions and everything that the actors go through. But I have a choice. I have a choice where I can be outside the movie and watch the whole drama going on. With me being an actor in the movie, I can still have a choice of being identified with the actor or being outside it. So that's what this message is really coming down to. Let me just get my timer. So just to summarize then, we talked about Brahman and Adhyatma. There's Aksharam Brahman and Adhyatma. Brahman is the total, and Adhyatma is the at a micro, so macroscopic and microscopic. You can look at it that way, at a totality and individual level. Then we talked about karma. Karma is the that which brings the creation into place. And then we talked about Adhibhutam is the whole totality of all the beings, and it is all Sharaha, or which is perishable. And Adhidaivam is the subtle plane of existence. And and then which is we talked about the Hiranyagarbha and Purusha examples. And then we talked about Adhiyajnam also. So we covered all this. Now we're coming into a completely different topic. So what happens when I'm close to leaving this body, when I'm close to exiting, when I'm close to packing my stuff and leaving from here? So that is the things that, but before we go there, any questions on this? Is it clear, or yeah, Meenu, anything?
Just reminded me of Drikdishya Vivek when you said you're the witness. In that also you gave example of Shah Rukh Khan. Like he's acting as a beggar, but he is not a beggar. He knows back of his mind, I'm just acting like a beggar. So
exactly,
that's just what it reminded me of.
Exactly. So one may say, why do I need to know about all this Adhiyajna and Adhibhuta and everything? But you can see, it is really refining our own thinking process all the way from 7th chapter. From the 7th chapter on, it is a sadhana for us to reduce our own ego. When I know that I'm not me alone living in this world, that I'm really part of the whole world, which again, as I keep bringing this point up, for our Gen Z, a lot of our mental issues that they go through is because they take to heart so much whatever we say or anything, it bothers them. You have to be so careful on how you talk to our younger generation today, mainly because their individual self is so strong. This set of 6 chapters probably is a very good sadhana for them, where slowly they can start to think, guess what? I'm not alone. I'm actually part of a bigger picture here. And if I go one step further, so in the 7th chapter, we are introduced to this concept of the fact that I'm part of the bigger picture. And when he talks about the bigger picture, he brings all the elements of the bigger picture that we can see: the trees, the buildings, the human beings, the animals, the plants. So we are actually part of that. And then, slowly and slowly, the way our thinking has to improve in order to bring that essence up. So then he starts to say, I know you're thinking that God is in the trees, God is in everything. He says, yes, I am all there, but I want to remind you that that aspect of me has got 2 parts, one which is inert, one which is perishable, and the other aspect which is the essence. And then slowly and slowly, he is asking us to focus on the essence. So you see how the devolution of thought is so beautiful. And then he also brings about in the 7th chapter about why is it that people are not able to focus on the essence? Why is it that people are more hung up about the things that are really perishing? Is because of the type of person I am. He starts to say, there are some people who just don't believe in me. So for such people, they have to come to a level where they understand who I am. And who I am, that is Krishna is saying, Krishna is saying, then they have to understand. And then we have that, he starts to say, slowly and slowly, people have to know that if they come to me, I will fulfill their wishes. So come to me. So, he is like waving the carrot and he says, come to me, I'll take care of you, and slowly and slowly, he's building that aspect of trust, Shraddha, that supreme quality which we need to have, which is really where today's generation is struggling. They are at a level where not only are they not able to trust themselves, they're not able to trust somebody else, trust more. So that is the whole process which we are seeing here. Up to the level of, in 7th chapter, he brings to the person of who is a yogi, the highest type of person. So that highest type of person is one who is able to now see that Lord only as the essence. How does that person start to meditate? So 8th chapter in that sense is a very, very advanced chapter. So that is where the last 2 shlokas, you see that Krishna is telling Arjuna, he's saying, guess what? You all have, a human body, and that human body is going to go away. And a human is the one who has the only way to realize his true self. The only way we are going to progress in our life is where I understand that I'm not this body, I'm that essence. So that is why he's bringing the last 2 shlokas, which is how does that man of realization, what does he think when he dies? So when he dies, or when he or she dies, he's only thinking about all, tell me, the questions that come is a very high level questions. Tell me, what is my relation with the world? Tell me how this world came about. Tell me about this. So that is why the 7 questions came about. And then in the 8th chapter, we are now seeing only at that level. So that is why the first 4 shlokas are only about that. Now this aspect of, the question is, Arjuna, he's answering this question of prayana kale cha api mam. How is it that at the time of my death, how do I practice this self-control? How can this, so that is the, what should be my last thought? Absolutely the last thought when I'm going to be dying. So that is the reason why these shlokas have come about, and we will, they are very simple, they are only questions, so we will do this. We'll just chant these shlokas and explain it also. Antakale cha mameva, Antakale cha mameva, Smaran muktva kalevaram, Smaran muktva kalevaram, Yah prayati cha samadbhavam, Yah prayati samadbhavam, Yati nastyatra samshayah, Yati nastyatra samshayah. So this is the question. So Krishna is telling, Antakale cha mam eva. Antakale, at the end of life, even at the end of the life, just remember me. Smaran muktva kalevaram. Does he remember while leaving his body? So kalevaram referring to the body. So a man of realization remembers Ishvara. Yap prayati sa madbhavam. Whosoever goes forth thus to my being, he reaches me, and there's absolutely no doubt about it. Yati na asti atra samshaya. So there is absolutely no doubt that at the end of my life, if you remember me, that you will come to me. You will totally come to me. So that is why that cha is very important there. It says antakale, which means that even at the time of death, one has to completely remember him. So that is the question. And if you remember the story of Jadabharata, right, in Bhagavatam, how this person who goes to the ashram, I mean, he's supposed to meditate, but then he gets attached to the deer, and then, oh dear, he just becomes completely, so he's born as a deer in the next birth. But it is not as if now this, these shlokas, doesn't mean that you can do anything you want, but at the end of the year, at the prayada kale, when the time comes for me to depart, I just think about God. It just doesn't happen that way. So that is why he's, he comes up in this shloka, the next shloka, to say that this this particular concept of remembering something and becoming something is not just in the case of spirituality. We know that, when we put a lot of effort and make it as a habit, then automatically, for example, if I think that I have to get up in the morning and walk, I can't just make a decision the previous night and say, I'm going to walk. It's almost impossible. My body has been trained to sleep for 8 hours or something. It's not going to get out of the bed. I have to train myself for a long period of time. So too, the same thing with remembering God. To have that thought in my mind, I should have trained myself. So that's why he says, Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam, Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam, Tyajatyante kalevaram, Tyajatyante kalevaram, Tam tame vaiti kaunteya, Tam tame vaiti kaunteya, Sada sadbhava bhavitaha, Sada tat bhava bhavitaha. So he says, yam yam, whosoever, thinking of any being, leaves the body at the end. Kalevaram, referring to the body. Tyajati, giving up. So whoever thinks of anything, leaves the body at the end, to that being only he goes. Again, the example of Jadabharata is very important. To that being he goes due to his constant thought of that being. Okay. So so the last thought is important, but not just the last thought alone, everything that I've done. And this Bruce Lee's quote is very, as you think, so shall you become. Guru, Swami Tejavananda gives this beautiful example from how many of you have read P.G. Wodehouse? P.G. Wodehouse, no? He's a British author, and it's a very funny, humorous, humorous novels, I've read a lot of P.G. Wodehouse when I was young. So in that, he explains about this guy who, goes to this pond of pigs, and he somehow wonders about these pigs. And so he writes a story about the pigs and everything. And then, imagine such a person in his next birth, he's going to be born as a pig. Why would he want to do something like this, right? So we have to be careful about what I think, and one can become this. So then if that is the case, then what is really the sadhana for us? What should we do? And that is given in shloka number 7. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu. Mam anusmara yudhyacha. Mam anusmara yudhyacha. Mayyar pitamano buddhihi. Mayyar pitamano buddhihi. Mame vaishyasya samshayaha. Mame vaishyasya samshayaha. So Krishna is therefore advising Arjuna. And here he is advising Arjuna because you see the word yuddha, which is war, is mentioned here. So he says, therefore, always remember me and then fight. And for all of us, always remember Krishna and do things, right? So, Maya Arpita Manobuddhi, with your complete mind and intellect. So it's not just at the level of body. So it's not like, as if I just keep doing Ram, 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 and then I do something else. I actually remember Ram in everything I do. I remember Krishna in everything I do. I remember that highest entity, this. And if I do that, there's just no doubt about that this will happen. So therefore, the sadhana here is, Krishna is saying that bring that aspect of God and in and through every action. And I remember Gurudev's one beautiful quote, he says about whether you're just picking up a handkerchief from somewhere or whether you're doing something really complicated, complex job, in and through everything, just remember him and you will see how beautiful your actions will turn out to be, So that is the sadhana aspect of coming in this chapter. You will see, having explained those very simple concepts, at the end of the day, he says, just remember him, just remember Ishvara, and your life will be good, So that is the final message. Any questions or any last thoughts? I know we are already 7 minutes above. Okay, so we'll finish. Go ahead, Anand.
Yeah, in the slokas it says like it's not enough to remember or try to remember, at the end of the life, one has to remember all the time continuously. Then
Correct.
that makes it easy, for him to, and for sure he will remember, he or she will remember God.
Exactly. That is, and it's the simplest thing, right? I mean, anything and everything I do, if I take the I factor out, and I think that I'm doing this, that I'm only an instrument, I'm just a nimitta, I'm only an instrument to do his work, life becomes so much more easier to really go through everything, because we are not in control of many of of what is happening to me. But how I react to it is within my control. And I remember this, Pradeep actually saying this even 20. Reaction, I have to be controlled in my reaction. But action, I have to do what I have to do. But how I react to what is happening to me, there I have to be strong. No,
Right.
I don't have
In the
any control.
slokas, in the slokas
Yeah.
also it says nimitta matram bhavasavi sachi. So
Yes.
you are just a namesake. You are there.
You're only an instrument. Only nimitta matram. I think it's in chapter 11. Yeah, which is also part of this section here. So the last three shlokas, as I said, were more about a sadhana part of it, and that's why we went through it. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kasyat dukkha bhag bhavet. Om shanti shanti shanti. Om purnamadah purnamidam purnat purnamudachyate. Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.